The World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Good mental health is a lot more than not being sick.
Look out for Charlie.
This is not normal.
Weaponized Narratives and the State of Fear, 2023. There was a channel I used to watch once in a while, and this guy talked about gang stalking and other issues. And I didn't necessarily agree with his assessments, but it gave me a view from his point of view. Recently, someone had brought me up to him on his channel, and he answered the comment saying that my ability to discern what is real and fake is terrible. Giving me the answer that I had been looking for about him, he believed that everything was fake and fabricated from the ground up. He also claimed that I spent way too much time talking about HAARP, and apparently not enough time talking about person-to-person interactions. And I'm going to say this again and for the last time, this is not a gang stalking channel. I do not cover gang stalking in any way, shape, or form. I cover radio frequency, ELF, electrical fields, and the sensitizers that make them extremely potent. None of this has anything to do with gang stalking, and if you are confusing the two or blending the two together, you are doing a great disservice to yourself and the people involved in this kind of thing. But going back to my discernment, he seems to allude to the idea that I believe that everything shown to me is real and is taken at face value. And none of that is true. There are certain incidents that have happened in the past, and you will never hear me talk about those incidents in a serious manner. However, what people like this fail to realize is, regardless of whether the incident really happened or not, or whether it went down the way the media has portrayed it, is irrelevant. Most of the time, the patsies are very real, and through months or years of being subjected to ELF, they are made pliable and malleable. So let's take Tamerlan Tsarnaev, for example. Tamerlan was visited by the FBI, and for the last few years of his life, he was subjected to 3 voices that constantly put him down and attacked him as a person. And this is much more common than you think. Tamerlan was a boxer. Now, I know someone who I communicate with on a regular basis who is very down-to-earth and sane. He was involved in MMA-style fighting for years, then was suddenly subjected to these types of voices and sounds. And it would seem as though these people were profiled with the thought process that they had violent tendencies due to their interests, and with the right nudging, they could be manipulated in a way that the people subjecting them to all this found valuable. When you've made someone paranoid and deranged, they are of great value to operatives. Tamerlan, as a boogeyman, could not only be manipulated and painted by the press at a later date, but could also be manipulated in real time by the voices he was hearing. That doesn't mean that the event he was tied to went down as described by the powers that be. It simply means that he was made pliable to fit into the narrative. James Holmes had been subjected to ELF since he was a child, seeing shadow people, ghosts, fighting with weapons in front of his eyes at night, flickering lights in his peripheral vision, and hearing knocking in the walls that he called nail ghosts, and more. There's a lot more to it. Every single thing that Holmes dealt with was a symptom of sensitization to ELF, RF, and electrical fields, and the knocking can easily be recorded and played back in a home. All of this was a process to make someone like Holmes pliable and suggestible for later purposes. The media downplayed Holmes' father as a simple manager of a software company when his role in software and programming went far, far deeper than that. Let's take Aaron Alexis, for example. Alexis didn't just begin to hear voices. Alexis had a security clearance. He was involved in the military-industrial complex. His journey into his nightmare began with vibrations that felt like wireless phone vibrations, keeping him up all night, and eventually pushing him out of his home and into hotels as it escalated. And the symptoms escalated from vibrations, banging in the walls, to voices. And this went on for months before he carved my ELF weapon into a shotgun. Does that mean that the incident went down how the media and the powers that be described? Absolutely not. But the patsy is very real, and alluding to the idea that none of this is real and none of these people went through this is not only a disservice to the cause, it's bordering on delusional. There is a lot out there that isn't real. And my immediate reaction to all narratives is usually, okay, let's find out what really happened. But claiming that every single thing isn't real, that every single piece of a story is fabricated, is retarded. With all that said, again, there are certain incidents that appear to be fabricated from start to finish. Ghostly phantoms with almost zero details to their stories, and any details given are completely contradictory. And you won't hear me talking about those incidents here. There is just too little evidence to even take them seriously, but there seems to be a plague within what people refer to as this community, and that plague is a self-centered one. It never ceases to remind me of a scene from Breaking Bad, that scene where Walter White relates everything to himself.
No, this whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
And the people who think like that can't get enough content like that. I've had many, many crazy and unexplained experiences in my life. Experiences that would leave most people slack-jawed. From what some would believe is paranormal to strange experiences that were clearly not paranormal but unexplained, to encounters with people and things out in the real world. So many experiences that people have told me in the past that I needed to write a book, long before I discovered what I talk about on this channel. But if you want to make progress with something, if you want to get the message out about something, it is imperative that you remove yourself from the equation. And that is what you see here. You don't come to this channel and see video after video of me talking about myself, or solely relying on my experiences as some sort of backing for whatever worldview I may be speaking about. And that is what a lot of people out there fail to realize. You get a lot further along by removing your feelings and experiences and looking at the rest of the world. When you challenge this narrative, people seem to get very upset. In my last video, I stated that so many people were being affected by this technology, I had a hard time believing that there were quote-unquote targeted individuals anymore. Of course, someone became upset by this, as though I was saying that people weren't experiencing this at all. When the reality was, I was stating that there really weren't special cases anymore, and everyone is being affected by this in one way or another. And if this is having an effect on all people, there are no individuals. And if everyone is being affected by this, there are no targets. There are simply people who are more sensitized than others. And making yourself special is a key factor into making yourself sound like a self-centered dick. I've had hundreds of emails sent to me asking, what makes people like me so special? And the answer is nothing. What makes a lottery winner so special? Sure, there are people out there who have got themselves put on radar for investigating something or blowing whistles, but a majority of the people affected by this are housewives or average people who have nothing to do with anything special. And these people are left to come up with reasons why it began to happen to them. And I have heard them all. One guy said it was because he played basketball pretty well. For real. So when people are put in a situation that makes them the center of their own attention for no reason, they will come up with insane reasons why they were made the center of attention. And it has become such a guessing game for people, they don't realize how insane they sound when they repeat the ideas that they have come up with. And what that really is the plague left behind from the last 2 decades of old thinking behind this technology. Sort of the stain still left on the sink, so to speak. Back when people actually believed that handheld weapons were being used everywhere and spooks and ghillie suits were in the bushes, they were left to come up with reasons as to why it was happening to them. And it's a piece from an old narrative that hasn't completely fallen off yet. Over the past 10 years, I have proven that the tree does make a sound, even if no one is there to hear it. I have personally traveled from the East Coast to Colorado and recorded these signals everywhere. In the air, in the ground, in caves, underwater, a constant barrage of hundreds and thousands of voices yammering on 24 hours a day. I have put recorders out in the forest and left them out for 24 hours or longer and found these signals never stopping. I've had recordings sent to me from all over the Western world and found these signals everywhere. I have left recorders going in empty homes for 24 hours and found these audio signals. The signals never stop. They don't follow a person. They are everywhere. And this discovery is bad for a paranoid narrative. If this ELF bubble is everywhere, then it doesn't take someone following someone around to make this happen to a person. In fact, it takes the personal angle of this out entirely. and this can be proven. Again, this is bad for the paranoid narrative. And they work hard to keep this narrative alive. I saw a video where a guy was holding up a vintage radar gun from the 1970s, claiming it was the weapon being used on him. He said he had found it in a nearby shed, which proves a few things. One, this tech will make someone do something that they wouldn't normally do, like break into somebody else's shed. Two, they will blame it on almost anything. And three, when people are not being believed that something is really happening to them by the larger population, they become even more irrational. So, these ideas actually help keep people far behind in the game of understanding this technology and how it works. Even after all the proof I have provided on this channel, we still have people showing up and leaving comments that attempt to bring us back to an era of handheld weapons and spooks on foot, blurring the lines between RF and ELF weapons and what people refer to as quote-unquote gang stalking. Someone just left a comment using another channel's name as a reference, claiming that they have discovered that Amazon delivery vehicles are putting these signals out. Funny, as I didn't see any Amazon delivery vehicles when I left the recorder in a national park for a night and recorded these signals, nor did I see an Amazon vehicle when I record these signals at 4 in the morning. It makes no sense. It's just another paranoid idea to push more paranoid ideas and keep people from realizing what is actually going on. Since I don't deal in gang stalking at all, and since I deal in RF, ELF, and the sensitizers being put in our skies, the idea that I talk about HARP type technology too much is ludicrous. There's no reason for me to talk about neighbors or stalkers, since neighbors and stalkers are not the people operating this tech. It's not being given to criminals and gangs to operate because it has been a vast signal for years and years. There is no need. Name one job or technology out there where the primary focus is to find more and more employees to operate it. There are none. Everything is being automated, and this is one of those times where people really need to separate themselves from the situation and really think about this, and where and how all this data can be built up and saved to create these AI databases. The thinking people are attempting to sell you is 20th century thinking, but the good thing is more and more people out there are understanding what is really going on. And for once, you see this for what it really is. And once you see this for what it really is, it's very hard to revert back to that old thinking style. Fear is a huge factor in this game. And once people realize how impersonal it all really is, a majority of that fear falls away. This was one of the primary reasons for starting this channel, to take the fear away for people. Once the fear falls away, so does the state of mind and the entrainment, and becomes more of a cosmic joke than anything else. If the world is being affected by this inadvertently or overtly, they are still being affected by it. Another reason I started this channel is to challenge what people believe they hear, and to get them to really think about this logically. People have heard the classic haunting symptoms in their homes, some believing it is very real, like real people. A house I once lived in was plagued with footsteps in the attic. Problem is, every house that I lived in had the classic attic, where only a gnome or a little person could walk around freely. So clearly, the steps were artificial. And many people dealing with this audio technology have claimed to hear large equipment being moved around in apartments or condos next to them, or hear footsteps that seem to follow them everywhere they go in their house or apartment. And even though we can prove that nothing is there in the cases that deal with houses, the people living in apartments seem to fall for this time and time again, believing that equipment really is being moved around, and it isn't. I've received more than a few emails in the past from people talking about this kind of thing, about how they were convinced there was something going on, driving them to the point of actually breaking into a place and then discovering that there was nothing there, except for a burglary charge had they got caught. People have heard this under houses and under mobile homes, some becoming convinced that people were drilling tunnels under their house. Now, regardless of whether tunnels are actually being drilled in places, the chances of you hearing it are nil. And if you are hearing it, it is intentional. And I assure you, it isn't because of you. And when you fall for it, you have weaponized yourself against yourself. This is how conspiracies about neighbors are conjured up, and why people think that their neighbors are doing things. And people wonder where this thinking comes from. It is all by design. Strangely, the same people who attempt to make this a personal narrative really seem to love the idea of satellites. Like one commenter recently came to my channel and talked about me alluding to the idea of quote-unquote Jewish space lasers, which is one of the most ridiculous ideas ever proposed to this type of technology. As if a technology like this, one that can never go down or go offline, is floating above us on a balloon somewhere. If there were technical problems, what would they do? Like spend a week pulling the satellite down, repairing it, and getting it relaunched? These signals are through Earth, and I can assure you that no satellites are needed. You can literally bury a recorder in the ground and still pick these voices up. So I find it highly strange and highly suspect that the same people who are so keen on selling people the idea that people in black leotards are pointing handheld sonic weapons at people all day are the same people trying to sell you a seemingly impersonal theory like satellites as well. And why is that? Because they are both severely flawed in logic and reason, and both end up with the subject sounding insane and being weaponized against themselves. So the old narrative is a weaponized narrative. And the people out there telling it, who believe it, who really believe it, are weaponized against themselves, or worse, attempting to weaponize other people's experiences against them. So when someone is convinced of this in the middle of the fear and bewilderment, it can make sense to them, to the point where all logic can be lost. For real. Like I once had a correspondence with somebody who was sensitized to these weaponized signals via email, and he believed that people were coming in and out of his house at night. So I told him to put baking soda around the doors and windows of the place, at least 7 to 8 feet out. So then he could be sure on whether the sounds he was hearing at night were real or not. And he did this and found that the baking soda wasn't being disturbed at all. But the audio trickery to his ears had a grip on him, and he couldn't believe it. So I told him to use baking soda on the whole house and then vacuum it up later. So he did that too. I even told him to put it under the attic entrance, to cover all the bases, which he did. Again, nothing was there. What the tricks to his senses were wearing on him mentally. And after all but proving to him that nothing was happening, he began to spiral and not being able to make sense of it. So, when the answer was actually very simple, he ended up emailing me a few days after our last correspondence, claiming that he had it all figured out. He took photos of a crack in the ceiling and sent them to me, and then claimed that the people were coming through this tiny crack each night and repairing it on their way out. And at that point, I told him good luck and cut off correspondence with him, because I knew at that point he was too far gone to reel back in. And that is what we were up against. A weaponized system of frequency that can trick the senses of a person to the point where they will become delusional in order to make sense of it. Now, think about a weapon like this sending gunfire into an area.
I thought this was it. I thought I was done for.
Everyone started to try to figure out where we were taking fire from. Check every trench. The only thing going through your head is the next step that I have to take. Move forward, find the enemy. But there was no enemy to find.
Whatever it was actually like holding a gun next to my ear and just opening fire.
Or screams for help, or any myriad of scenarios.
I just heard his wife screaming, "Stop it," and then a bunch of shots went off, and now I can't hear her over there at all.
The 911 caller says the threat was real.
You heard him say that he was going to kill everybody in the neighborhood?
Yes, I even have on video, "Send the police, I'll get them too."
And the people will swear that is what really happened, to the point of delusion. That is why awareness is everything. That is why I will not stop talking about this. That is why the fear has to be erased from this with education, not with misinformation and not with fear. So there are still remnants of the old narrative floating around. And this is not a gang stalking channel. I will never cover that. I will always be covering what I cover. And as the story branches out, I will cover that as well. But I will never cover this old narrative that is finally falling off. And good riddance to it. And that's it for now. Look out for Charlie.
Come on, do Nazi stuff.
Look out for Charlie.